Thank you.
Sure. Ronnie had a question in the chat window about glyph fonts. Are you meaning icon fonts? Is that what you were asking about? Yes. Okay. Um, so yeah, I think icon fonts are pretty awesome. Um, I I really like working with them a lot, um, and I think that um, in most cases, that's totally fine. There is one major drawback about them, though. So an icon font is really just like any other font that you might be using, but it's just made up literally of icons, and um, and they might be social media stuff. They might be icons of your own design. They could be all sorts of things, and um, they're really awesome, and they're a great way to provide resolution-independent graphic assets to your site, so that they'll look great on Retina displays and everything else. The thing that you have to watch out for is there's no good fallback. So if the web font doesn't load, there's just nothing there. So while I still use them, it's because I haven't gotten my act together enough to try Grunticon, and so that is something from the Filament group that they created in order to let you take SVG graphics and create PNG fallbacks and the CSS to use them. So that way you could have all of these icons that work in a resolution independent manner just using SVG, and then still have PNG there as a fallback for devices that don't understand SVG, which is a pretty small percentage these days. And so the reason that I think this is important and worth thinking about is that there's always a point in time when the web font's not loaded. So there's always going to be a point in time during that load process when your icons aren't there, and if there's no good fallback, people have no idea what those things are. So they don't know that it's a link to your Facebook profile. They don't know that it's elements that are supposed to guide you through the UI and indicate that this is a list of articles. So it is worth thinking about. And then you also have to consider that if you have a very international audience, there are tons of devices, 350 million of them or so, that are using Opera Mini that doesn't support icon fonts or any kind of web font at all. So that is kind of a big problem if you work on an international site that has a ton of traffic from areas of Africa or India or Asia. So that is something to think about. I think if you have a largely sort of U.S.-centric audience, then maybe that's fine. I know I rely on it. If you use Modernizer built into your code, then you can do a bunch of feature detects and find out if web fonts will be supported. So hopefully that'll answer your question there. But I think in general, you can probably say, sure, I'm going to use web fonts because they're going to be, or icon fonts rather, because they're supported pretty much anywhere, unless you fall into that category of I deal with a lot of people with slow network connections and using really low capability handsets that need to get all of this stuff right away. And then take a look at Grunticon from the Filament group, and that will give you an easy way to go around that and use SVG instead. So hopefully that answers your questions there, Ronnie. The next question here in the sidebar is from, I'm sorry, is Aloki? I don't know, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Asking about using the same font for headings and body copy. I generally don't. I like the contrast. That is one of the sort of fairly standard conventions in typographic design, to have something that gives you a little bit of contrast and draws a little more attention to itself. So you might use a heavier serif typeface for your headings, and then have a sans serif that works nicely with it on